Before we even begin, this is a very important video and I highly recommend that you watch until the end. This video is not targeted towards the highly competitive Vanguard player, because that player is ready to always spend money on the most meta deck in order to achieve their victory as efficiently as possible. Therefore, just like in other TCGs, if a new expensive card that is important comes out, they will most likely spend for it because they value winning in tournaments over everything else. And that is perfectly fine, and that is what a lot of my viewer base is, and that's why I make the disclaimer. Who this video is especially targeted to is the semi-competitive player slash semi-casual who loves their deck and loves their specific clan, and they love winning with it, and they do their best to improve with that deck against the meta and buy into the new cards that come out as support for their clan that they may possibly use to achieve wins more easily. As of making this video, the worst possible thing has happened, and as I mentioned before about ZR ratios, the worst possible scenario was for them to print one of each per case. And that's exactly what happened, and in each carton you have one Drachma and one Megiddo. As of making this video, those are the only ZRs that have been released. Therefore, I will possibly update this video if necessary if the situation is not fixed, but for now, ZRs are scarce and ZRs are expensive. The two ZRs we do have belong to the Dragon Empire Nation as well as the Megalanica Nation. Now the question for this video is, are they necessary? Do you need them? Anything of that sort? The long question, for the competitive player, the answer may be yes, but it's not a definite yes. But the fact that they are printed at one copy per case of each means that the game is currently at a risk of dying. The reason why I say this is because this already happened once in the past with the Legion format. I know that some of you may not have been playing back then, maybe only started during the G era or simply took a break for the game in between the Legion era. And what the Legion era was that it was not a shortly printed mechanic, it was an overwhelmingly OP mechanic that was not equally distributed amongst the clans, and therefore a lot of people quit because their clan was not getting support and was left in the trash. Which is perfectly understandable, because if you can't play your favorite deck, which the Vanguard anime especially but insists that that is the right thing to do with its portrayal of the characters, then obviously you will have that kind of backlash. Now the problem with ZRs is not as comparable to Legion, because Legion, it was surplus-wise, in terms of, the cards actually existing, it was perfectly fine. The problem with ZRs is that there are not enough for everyone to have one. Therefore, in tournaments, when you see one, it'll actually be a surprise. Not all decks will be running it. I find ZRs to be most easily compared to the first introduction of Limit Break in Japan, because we had a different schedule of releases in English, but in Japan, everything went along order, and first we had BT05 with the End and Majesty Lord Blaster, and Tsukuyomi pre-existing as well, and then all the Limit Break cards released, and of course they were new, and they were, as always, shown off in the anime, and everybody was talking about them because they were new, but in the actual final WGP Championship that took place after the release of, I think, even BT09, the end of the Legion late season, the winning decks were still the End, Majesty Lord Blaster, and Tsukuyomi. These were decks that did not use Limit Break cards at all and still managed to win. I find ZRs to be comparable to that because it showed that even though Limit Break was a new mechanic, it was not necessarily the best and was not necessarily the one that you had to use in order to win or be happy with the game. You could simply stick to what you already had or find other alternatives to what the game is already presenting to you and adapt to the newly developing meta. What happened back then was that people just stuck with their strongest decks. Obviously, you might as well just stick with your strongest thing if the new cards are not as strong as the pre-existing ones. But I find this comparison to be quite close to the situation we're facing right now. Now, I'm going to talk about the ZRs themselves more in depth in the actual set breakdown. It's going to take up a huge slot of it, trust me, because there's a lot of discussion to be had, and by then we'll have some tournament results as well, so there's going to be a lot to talk about them. But as a quick breakdown, Megiddo is really good because he gives you a lot of attacks. He also manages to field your entire, spawn your entire field from your drop zone, which helps pretty much any clan that can use it, whether it's Bermuda or Grand Blue or Aquaforce, while Drachma is, in my opinion, a bit less good because it essentially forces your opponent to mill 3 and lose their field, but pretty much most Dragon Empire clans are already able to do that, maybe except Murakumo. And so I believe that Megiddo is a very impactful one Drachma also is depending on the timing that you use it in, but my conclusion with both of these cards is that there are alternatives that you can do to both of them to achieve similar results for either a similar cost, a lesser cost, or a greater cost, but not to the point that it's greater, to the point that it's not actually worth using that alternative. And one thing that we must not forget about ZRs is that after you use it, your G-Zone does disappear. All these new G-Guards that are coming out that are able to unlock your units, unflip all these kind of things, all these magical G-Guards that we can use, you will no longer be able to use them because your G-Zone will be gone. Don't forget that. People seem to forget when talking about ZRs that your G-Zone goes away after them. I'm going to present a few alternatives to each clan that currently has an ultimate stride available. I may update this in the future depending on if they increase the availability of the ZRs in the future boosters, but we don't know that for now. We may know in the future by the time you might be watching this video, who knows. Currently, at the pre-order prices in Japan are putting up Drachma at about 15,000 yen, which is about 150 bucks, and Megiddo at about 120 bucks, like 12,000 yen. So these are insane prices. Instead of buying one card that may not even be as efficient as other strides you already have in your deck, you could pretty much buy a new deck. If you want to go for meta, you could just build ZTB off of that money. It is actually ridiculous how expensive they are, and it's understandable because if it's one per case, of course they're going to be that expensive. It's not just one clan that needs this either, several clans per nation. So I'm going to present my list of alternatives. Obviously, I only am well versed in some of these clans, so some of this will come from general knowledge of watching the deck being played and talking to people that know how to play these decks very well. And I'm going to refer to clans, but obviously I will be mostly referring to the most, well, popular / most played decks of those clans. The first one, and the one that I feel is most unnecessary to use a ZR, is Kagero itself, which would be using Drachma. Kagero has access to Ziegenberg, which is an insane stride that can restand for pretty much no cost at most times. And if you're going to be using Drachma, you're going to be using it on your opponent when there are at least 4 damage. Ziegenberg can pretty much deliver the exact same effect, if not already close out the game, because not only do you have a restanding Vanguard, you also have strong rear guards in a deck like Blademaster, or even in a deck like Overlord, that will also go up on top of that. When Drachma hits the field, sure, it makes your opponent mill 3, but it does nothing after that. Next up is the brand new and freshly revealed The Purge, Dragonic Overlord, so this will be more for the Dragonic Overlord deck. It drive checks up to 5 times in a normal fight. Plus, it also burns damage, which is also quite ridiculous, which can put your opponent even closer to losing. So don't forget that these two very important strides exist as alternatives to the ZR. And do not forget that Kagero has some of the best G-Guards in the game. I don't think that it's worth to give up your entire G-Zone for the ZR just to lose some of the best G-Guards in the game like Denial Griffin. I personally do not think that it is worth it. We have Narukami, who has access to VMAX, V-Buster, which are both strong finishers with additional drive checks in V-Buster's case, and let's not forget that the Narukami GB8 is one of the best in the game that can counter some of the meta decks like Luard and Night Rose. Meanwhile, Drachma is not able to deliver the same effect. Do you want your opponent to lose 3 cards from their hand and their field, or do you want them to lose their entire drop zone and access to any of their possible future resources while you're hitting them with big numbers and possibly finishing the game right there? For Nubatama, I feel I shouldn't even need to say this because Mugen Lord delivers a very similar experience, because by poking your opponent with many small attacks, you're forcing them to drop a lot more cards in hand than just 3. Plus, you have a new grade 2 that also forces the opponent to stay on 11k, so honestly, Mugen Lord delivers a very similar experience, and I don't think Shirane would really need Drachma that much. The one that's arguably the hardest to defend would be Murakumo, but the new Yasuya stride gives criticals to your rear guards up to 5 times. Don't forget that your rear guards can attack from the back row. That is quite insane. Although Murakumo does not have access to as much removal, therefore it is the hardest one to defend for not needing the Drachma, but I still believe that you have other ways in Murakumo to still close out games without necessarily focusing on the control aspect of the nation. And the final one, which, well, I think this one isn't as hard to defend, which is Tachikaze. Don't forget that Dogma is still one of the most aggressive strides that exist, because it's able to restand for, you know, and still retain so many drive checks, and it's overall just doing so much in that turn. plus the new Engorge Stride essentially counters lock. So I really don't think you need to be worrying too much about removal because you still have other rearguards that also retire units. So I think worrying about the discard 3 when you could be pushing for big numbers with your Dogma and with your rearguards should not be the biggest problem. So that's it for Drachma. I feel Drachma is easier to also defend my opinions against because it is not as much of an impactful stride and doesn't give you resources as much as Megiddo does. So for Megiddo, first off will be Grand Blue, and obviously Night Rose is a very important topic. I'm not even going to talk about grade 170s because you don't stride in that deck to begin with. Well, at least not stride much. But with Grand Blue, you do have access to a combo that I feel is quite overlooked, which is the Zonger with double of the new grade 3 Night Rose combo, which is able to close out games on first stride depending on some of the decks that you might be facing. Apart from that, you still have Gouache, which farms you so many cards, and don't forget you have so many rearguards that make combos like Bone that you can just create so many magnificent combos out of. And if you're playing Japanese format, you have the brand new Night Rose Stride, which does even more than that. And she will be coming to English eventually, I'm certain of it. It's not confirmed, but there's no way she's not coming. She even has an official English translation. For Aquaforce, I feel this is the easiest answer. You win the game on second stride with the new GR. I've been talking to my good friend Solemn Vanguard that I'm sure some of you know, and he's been testing the new Aquaforce stuff, and he told me it's essentially you win on second stride and you can't even afford to use the Zeroth Dragon because of how much Counterblast it eats up, and so does the deck. The deck is so aggressive at this point thanks to the new support that it can just pull out miracles on second stride and withstanding your units with like 36k attacks. If you want more of that info, you're gonna have to check his channel when he eventually does a video on that. Bermuda this time is the one that's for me hard to defend because, well, with Aquaforce, you know, it's nice that Megiddo spawns you a field from your drop zone, but because you can play so fast and the new GR does so much more, I don't feel it's as necessary. You can just push the game through without even worrying about the resources as much. Meanwhile, with Bermuda, it does return its own resources to its own hand very frequently, plus you have a deck like Prism which plays very fast and has access to some really strong strides, plus you have Anji which essentially counters Link Joker, which is currently meta, so it's overall shouldn't be the biggest problem. But again, just like Murakumo in the previous one, it's a bit hard to defend because it gives you even more resources by pulling things from the drop zone. Now again, I will repeat that these points were mostly to the semi-competitive player. I am not proposing this even to the competitive player because I know that the competitive player will test things on their own most likely without even buying into the ZRs, or will test before they come out in English because that's what a competitive player does. That's what they dedicate their time to. They're going to test and they're going to decide if it's even worth to invest in such a card. But for the competitive player, if they have to invest in such a card, then they will. Therefore, even if my points are just alternative things that you can do to close out games instead of going for a Zeroth Dragon, like, the competitive player will decide things on their own. Meanwhile, I really want to reassure the semi-competitive player that there are alternatives. We've been playing this game the same way, and there's so much new support coming out for new decks all the time. Look at Thabas just kept coming back out of nowhere. It was doing poorly right before, and now it's just coming back in full force, pun intended. But honestly, like, I am disappointed. I'm disappointed like a lot of people in how little ZRs there are per case. I do not think this was the right decision, and I'm not sure who made the decision because I can't blame all of Bushiroad. I'm sure that the majority of Bushiroad's staff, whether it's in Europe, America, Singapore, wherever outside of Japan, even in Japan, aren't responsible for this decision, and it's somebody else that decided that it was a good idea. Thematically and lore-wise, it does make sense because the Zeroth Dragons are supposed to destroy Vanguard, and honestly, it's a pretty good attempt at trying to kill off your player base. But I don't think the person that designed that part thought too much about the fact that Legion almost made the game die. I really hope that you listened to this video because I feel like this is very important. I do not want people to quit. I do not want a repeat of Legion. I want us to keep enjoying the game together in any way possible, and I want the game to continue growing because I know that Bushiroad learns from their mistakes. They somehow recovered from Legion. They used to have really bad GR pull rates. They upped them like crazy. Now it's perfectly fine. You know, they reprinted things like Amnesty and Next Stage. Like, Bushiroad definitely listens, so make sure to make some noise to make sure that they know that one of each ZR per case is not okay, but most importantly, let your other friends that are semi-competitive know about this. Show them this video, maybe just tell them that if they're thinking about quitting just because the ZRs are expensive, that doesn't mean you have to play them. Just because Limit Break was a new format back in 2012, that doesn't mean that people stepped away from their currently existing strong decks just to grab the newest thing available. Just because it's the newest thing available and has a pretty scary effect on paper doesn't mean that it delivers the same kind of effect that your pre-existing or new cards are able to deliver without relying on this scarcely printed card. Think about it, think about the alternatives, and I'm sure you'll figure something out. Obviously, while I was naming the decks, I was mostly just referring to the ones that are competitively viable. I think anybody that plays the game purely on a casual basis, that only wants to enjoy the game for its art or just for the fun of playing with some friends, probably won't even consider investing into a Zeroth Dragon because it's just too expensive for the kind of thing you're getting as a casual player. It's much more beneficial to a competitive player who's actually going for wins, might even be going for cash tournaments. You know, these are things that happen and they're quite realistic. So, like I said before, share this with your friends. If you have any other semi-competitive friends or just people that love the game and are afraid because of Zeroth Dragons, share this video to them and let them know. And also to my fellow content creators, whether you're a blogger, a YouTuber, or any sort of person that has an audience that listens to them, if you agree with the points that I have said today, I would highly appreciate if you made a video or post or whatever of the similar sort, because the more people this kind of word reaches, the more people know that there are alternatives and that ZRs are not the end of all and like the most important card in history, then the more damage we can prevent, and then Vanguard will not have to end, because if a lot of people quit, Vanguard is most likely going to end, and I really don't want that to happen. I want Busho to know that they made a mistake, but I don't want Vanguard to end. Like I said, share this with your friends that you know would appreciate this kind of thing. I know that this does not apply to the competitive player as much, but for you semi-competitive people, I would really appreciate it if you watched this, well, as you probably already have, and shared it with other friends of yours that have this similar opinion or similar fear of Zeroth Dragons just being too overwhelming, because that is, in my opinion, so far from the ZRs revealed, not the case. So yeah, honestly, I really did not want to make this kind of video. This is not the video I was hoping to make. I was hoping to make a video saying thank you Busho for making 4 of each ZR per case, but that is obviously not the case for now, pun intended. But I think possibly they might recover in the future. They recovered with GRs, they recovered from Legion somehow, which almost made the game be cancelled. So, you know, I have hope in Busho. As long as they listen to people's words and as long as people share this kind of opinion, then it will most likely be fine. So, like I said before, especially if you have the luxury to buy ZRs, then, you know, be my guest, it's your money. But I think if you don't have that kind of luxurious budget to just be spending it on a $150 piece of cardboard, then I think you're better off saving it and thinking up alternatives that your deck can deliver. Don't forget that new cards, there are still many new cards coming out for each clan and not just the Zeroth Dragons. So let's keep that in mind and press on forward. Like I said before, do share this with your friends that share a similar opinion, and for all you content creators out there, if you do share a similar opinion, then also please spread the word. So before I go, I would just like to remind everyone that GZ is the final season of Vanguard G, or the final season of the Stride era, meaning we'll be moving on to something new after GZ. So when Legion was finishing up and G started, Legion was basically phased out as fast as possible. It was just gone. A few decks still exist, like D-Robos, that use Legion, but that Legion is used 1 in 10 games. It's basically a Stride deck at this point. So it was phased out so fast, and honestly I have a feeling that the ZRs will be phased out just as fast with the new mechanic that will most likely come. I'm pretty positive in thinking that they'll just make a new type of unit in the G zone that will just have a different kind of interaction with the game. So we'll see, but you know, I don't think it's going to be as hard to get as a ZR, you know, but oh well, that's how things are. So thank you very much for listening, for your support, for your attention and everything. I really appreciate it, and I'm always going to be here. I've been playing Vanguard since the start. I stayed through Legion, I've been through it all, I've been sitting here for as long as possible, and I love the game. And even at these terrible times right now, I still enjoy the game, and I think it will recover, and it'll be just as strong as it was before. So I hope to see you here again. I hope that we can all keep playing Vanguard together and enjoying and sharing our experiences, whether it's on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, wherever it may be, whether it's on Discord or anything like that. I hope to keep playing the game with you guys, and I hope to keep seeing you guys for each of my new videos. I still have a lot of good things coming, so I hope you guys do keep playing the game and do look forward to that as well. So that's gonna be it for me today. I appreciate your attention. I appreciate any of your help in spreading the word as well. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.